everyone, good morning and welcome to the show. You're here with me, Amaya, on yet another brand new morning. Of course, it's great to be with all of you in your living rooms, bringing the best of what's happening here in the country, as well as current issues that you should be aware of right to your doorstep. And it's always nice to be a part of your morning, and we know that you look forward to different topics that we bring you on the show. And this morning, we'll be dealing with something that many of you may have been familiar with, maybe because you yourself have tried to be a part of this particular process, or you know relatives or friends who have been a part of this process. And I'm speaking about migration. Now, this is something that many families and businesses and professionals opt to do for various reasons, and migrating to Australia has become something of a trend these days, I guess you could say, in the Colombo areas as well as the suburbs and in some of the large cities here in Sri Lanka. And there are always proper channels and proper methods that you have to follow when it comes to this sort of migration. And there are serious issues that have cropped up in the recent past because of the illegal migration that happens here in Sri Lanka, and it's something that needs to be addressed. It has been addressed very much in the past few months and in the past few years, but it still persists. And the important thing is to bring this number of illegal migrations down to zero, and to encourage everyone to follow the proper channels when it comes to pursuing a new life, because you don't want to start off on a bad note, right? So on that note, we have a very special consultant. He's an expert consultant from Australia. He is the director of Australian Migration and Citizenship, and he's here with us on the show to give you all the information you need to take know the correct procedure to take this next big step in your life. And we have with us Mr. Peter Loughton. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, Amaya. How are you today?
It's lovely to have you. I'm fine, and how are you?
Very well, thank you. Another fine day in Colombo.
Of course. I'm here. I've heard, now you've been here for about a week, so I've heard that you've been enjoying yourself in Colombo these days.
I have, yes.
And you've also been holding a few seminars on Australian migration, because do you find that although the information is available for anyone who looks it up, that many people are not aware about the correct procedure for migrations?
Very much, and I think the internet is a great source. It's a great resource. It allows you to obtain first-hand information, but it also sometimes makes people a little bit dangerous to themselves, because they'll take the internet as gospel and they'll go along a pathway and then find that when they get to the end of the pathway it doesn't actually lead to a visa. So it's always a caution that we give to people to say, use the internet, it's fantastic, but don't rely on it totally.
Alright, so it's very important to get the correct information firsthand. And I think we have had a few cases of illegal migrations happening here in Sri Lanka. I'm sure the number has reduced now due to increased awareness. But before we go into this serious issue, I mean, first maybe you could explain to us exactly why it's called illegal. What is illegal migration? What constitutes as that?
Well, that's also a very vexed question. And politicians have a definition of it. The United Nations has a definition of it. Everybody seems
the
to have
US these days is having a very big problem with it.
Yes, everybody seems to have a definition of it. In reality, to be illegal probably means that you're in the country and your visa has expired and you become what we call an unlawful non-citizen. If you're coming into the country to claim a political asylum of some description under the UN Charter, then technically you may not necessarily be unlawful, because you're using a right that the UN has bestowed upon you, and we as a signatory, Australia that is as a signatory, is bound by that convention while retaining its sovereignty. So the issue of illegal migration is going to stay with us for many, many years. You have to look at what happened in Europe, in Italy. There's all sorts of things, and I think that the issue of illegal is in the eye of the beholder. Sometimes it becomes a very political issue, and it's often sad that there's many devastating cases that are forcing people to do these things, or think that they have to do these things, when there are maybe other avenues that are out there.
But let's talk about the consequences of this illegal migration. How does it impact the individual and as well as the country that he or she migrates to?
Well, I suppose it doesn't impact Australia from where I sit anyway. I'm sure it does in some other ways. But I think that many people die in the attempt to cross the oceans. And even in the short stretch of land between Indonesia and Christmas Island, which is not a huge distance by world terms, it's an extremely dangerous set of piece of water, and there's boatloads of people with 100 on board in a leaky boat, and probably many people die in the process. So I'm not an advocate of people getting on a boat to go to another country, because the likelihood is that many more people are probably going to perish than actually ever reach the shore, and that's a very sad state of affairs.
Of course, and when you speak about the seriousness of this issue, maybe you can tell us in terms of numbers, if you could, how serious this issue was and the current status quo?
Look, from a numbers point of view, I don't have those figures. They're more like an immigration department statistic, but they do publish those, so they're not hiding those figures. They do have a lot of statistical publications on the Department of Immigration and Border Protection's website, and anybody can click on there and have a look at the documents that get published, and they do publish them. In terms of the amount of people that arrive in Australia by boat, I actually don't have those figures, so you've caught me on the hop there.
Oh dear.
Yes, that's not good.
The point is that those figures exist. It's not zero. Yes.
Yeah, it's certainly not zero. It's certainly not zero. But
so then again, it's very important for everyone to know what the correct procedure of migration is. So maybe you can take us through the first step when it comes to the migration process.
Okay. So there is a program called the Skilled Migration Program, and Australia takes around 190,000 is the intake this year. Which is quite a lot when you add on family members, which could be 3 or 4 or 2 or whatever. So there could be upwards of a half.
With the Sri Lankan family, usually 3 or 4 maybe. Yes.
And many other countries are the same. So it could be upwards of 500,000 people entering the country on a migration program. It's pretty much strictly built on a skill and on having an English capability. So the government says that if you can't speak English to a certain level, and you don't have a recognised skill, that is a trade certificate, a diploma or bachelor degree of some description, master's, PhD, then the likelihood is you're not going to get a visa to come into the country.
Okay, so it's very important.
Yeah, and the skilled migration portion of that 190,000, I think is around 120,000, 130,000. So that's a lot of skilled workers that are coming into the country and starting their new lives.
Of course, and are there any skills in particular that you look out for when it comes to granting the visas to these workers?
Definitely. The Australian government produces the skilled occupations list, commonly called the SOL, the SOL, and I'm sure many of your viewers today will know that, because it's sort of become the byword. If you're looking at Australia, then SOL, get on the SOL.
See what kind of skills you got.
Yes, skilled occupations list, definitely. And each state and territory also has its own skilled occupations list. So while the federal government has one list, each state and territory has its own. So there's another 6 states and 2 territories, so there's another 8 lists. And on top of that, there are regional areas which also may have their own list. And for instance, if you go into New South Wales, it could have another 12 or 13 regions. So they will also have their own lists. So when we look at occupations, it's almost impossible to tell if you meet a criteria if you're just looking at the skilled occupations list. Your occupation may not be on that. But it may be on one of the other states or territories, or one of the many regional lists that do exist.
Australia is a vast country. It is a continent which is a country.
Very true. It's commonly known as the world's largest island, and if you want to, from a comparative point of view, it covers around 8 million square kilometres. Now Sri Lanka, I think it was sitting at about 64,000 square kilometres. So Australia's
really no comparison.
It's 100 times larger than Sri Lanka, with about the same population.
Oh wow!
So 23 million.
That's why you really invite skilled professionals to come into your country.
Of course, and we have a lot of resources, very, very large distances between everywhere. To fly from Perth to Melbourne is 4.5 hours. I'm from Perth. It's quicker for me to go to Singapore. and certainly much quicker for me to go to Bali
Okay.
or Jakarta than it is for me to go to the other side of Australia. So it just demonstrates the length and the breadth of the country.
Of course, but you spoke about the skills necessary and as well as the English competency. But are there any other qualifications, pre-qualifications that you need to migrate to Australia that people should be aware of?
Well, to get a visa, you need to score points.
Okay.
If you are migrating as a skilled migrant, then the magic target is 60, and you achieve that by age, qualifications, English language ability, work experience, and sometimes the states will sponsor. So if the state does sponsor you, they can contribute to your total score.
Okay.
And if you reach the total score of 60, the magic number, the likelihood is that you'll receive an invitation from the government, and then you lodge your application, and that will then be processed. So once we get to the invitation stage, in my experience, it's unlikely, unless there's a medical or a criminal issue, it's unlikely that you won't get the visa.
I see.
It may happen, of course, but it hasn't happened in our business as yet.
Oh wow, okay. So you do, it's a very transparent process and a
Very much.
Okay, and
I think the issues, sorry to cut in on you there, the issues relate to some parts of the process being an objective test and some parts being a subjective test. And by that I mean age is objective. You are or you are not. You have a degree, you do or you do not.
Yes.
You have an English score of whatever, you do or you do not. The work experience issues come about where people claim work experience but actually they can't provide a reference from the business that has been employing them, or the reference they do provide doesn't match the occupation that they claim. That's the subjectivity of it.
I see, all right.
And that's when we're looking at points of 10 or 15 points for work experience, it becomes critical that you get these issues correct when you're looking at your references and when your representative is working out whether you have the ability to migrate to Australia or not.
So a lot of things to keep in mind if you are considering starting out on this process. Of course, we'll be asking Peter all other queries as well when it comes to this particular process, as well as the legal method of going about this. That's very important. So stay with us. We'll be right back on Good Morning.